Daniel woke to another morning that felt like every other. The sun cut through the blinds in pale streaks, landing across a neatly made bed that had long since lost the warmth of shared intimacy. His husband, Ethan, had left early again. Another meeting, another commitment that seemed to matter more than lingering kisses or late-night whispers. Their marriage, though stable on the surface, had settled into a rhythm that no longer fed Daniel's restless heart. There were no arguments, no dramatic fights, just a slow erosion of closeness that left him both grateful for peace and starved for passion. That Saturday, Daniel found himself staring into the bathroom mirror, running his fingers through his grown-out hair. It had been weeks since his last trim. The man staring back at him seemed older than his 36 years. Lines under the eyes, a weariness that no amount of rest could cure. He remembered how Ethan used to touch his hair, playfully praising the curl, yet now Ethan barely noticed when Daniel entered a room. The silence between them had grown too wide, filled with polite exchanges and distracted nods. Without much thought, Daniel decided he wouldn't return to the same small barbershop he always used. That place mirrored his life, familiar, dependable, and bland. He wanted something different, even if only in appearance. He searched quickly on his phone and found a new barbershop just a few blocks away, known for its stylish cuts and vibrant energy. It felt like a harmless change, a minor decision. Yet, deep inside, he sensed that even the smallest deviation from routine might stir something long dormant. The barbershop greeted him with the smell of cologne and fresh coffee, walls lined with mirrors that stretched endlessly. Music pulsed faintly from hidden speakers, creating a rhythm that made Daniel's heart tap in sync. Young men laughed in the waiting area, each dressed in sharp clothes that contrasted with his own simple sweater and jeans. For a moment, Daniel felt out of place, an intruder in a world where style was currency. Then he saw him. The barber approached with confident ease, dark hair swept back neatly, his sleeves rolled high to reveal toned arms inked with precise lines of tattoos. His name tag read Leo, but it wasn't the name Daniel noticed first. It was the eyes, sharp and knowing, paired with a smile that carried mischief. Leo's voice was smooth, casual, but tinged with a warmth that seemed aimed directly at Daniel. "First time here?" Leo asked, guiding him to the chair. Daniel nodded, settling in, unsure why his pulse quickened. "Yeah, just thought I'd try somewhere new." As the cape draped around his shoulders, Daniel caught their reflection in the mirror, his own hesitant expression framed by Leo's confident stance. Leo's hands moved with practiced precision, but each touch carried something unspoken. Fingers brushed Daniel's neck with a softness that lingered a fraction longer than necessary. Their eyes met briefly in the mirror, and Daniel looked away, heat rising in his chest. The conversation began simply where Daniel worked, how long he had lived in the neighborhood, but there was an undercurrent that neither named. Leo's questions cut slightly deeper than small talk, his gaze unwavering. It was as though he could sense Daniel's hunger for attention, for recognition. With every snip of the scissors, the distance between them seemed to close. Daniel told himself it was the slip of paper remained tucked away in Daniel's wallet for days, folded tightly as though secrecy itself were pressed into its creases. He told himself it meant nothing, a trivial gesture from a flirtatious barber. But every time he reached for his card at the grocery store or paid for a coffee, the number whispered to him like a hidden dare. His nights stretched long and restless, Ethan asleep beside him, the soft glow of the phone tempting him to dial. Ethan's absence no longer needed to be physical. Even when present, he was somewhere else, buried in work, emails, distracted by meetings, worn down by obligations. He would kiss Daniel goodnight without lingering, speak in half-finished sentences, and retreat into silence. Daniel tried to ignore the ache, but the slip of paper became a magnet for every lonely thought. One Thursday evening, after a glass too many of red wine, Daniel gave in. His hands trembled as he typed the digits into his phone. The line rang once, twice, then a familiar voice answered. "I was wondering when you'd call," Leo said, amusement threading through his tone. The invitation came swiftly. Leo suggested they meet after hours at the shop. No customers, no interruptions, just them. Daniel hesitated, guilt pressing hard against his chest, but the yearning for attention overwhelmed his resistance. He agreed, telling himself it was only a conversation, nothing more. The barber shop was dim when he arrived, its mirrors reflecting faint streaks of neon from the street outside. Leo leaned casually against the chair, sleeves rolled high, smile sharp enough to cut through Daniel's fear. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing them in a cocoon of secrecy. What began as laughter quickly grew heavier. Leo's questions weren't about work or routine. They dug deeper into what Daniel missed, what he longed for, what he feared admitting even to himself. Daniel found his defenses melting under the intensity of Leo's gaze. When Leo's hand brushed his arm, the touch ignited a spark that had smoldered for years. The first kiss arrived without warning. It was reckless, urgent, steeped in danger. Daniel's body betrayed him, answering a hunger long denied. For a moment, time dissolved, the world narrowing to two men in a locked shop, tasting the thrill of transgression. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Daniel whispered the word no, though every part of him ached to say yes. But the line had been crossed. In the days that followed, Daniel drifted further from Ethan. He laughed more easily, moved with a new energy, and carried a glow he hadn't known in years. Yet his phone became an accomplice to lies, messages from Leo hidden beneath bland notifications, their conversations laced with heat and danger. Every buzz in his pocket sent a thrill up his spine, followed by a stab of guilt when Ethan's face entered his mind. Their meetings grew bolder. A coffee shop on the edge of town, a walk through quiet streets at night, stolen kisses in the shadow of closed storefronts. Leo was insistent, fearless, unconcerned with the risks. Daniel, meanwhile, lived in constant tension, pulled between the safety of his marriage and the intoxicating fire of this new affair. At home, Ethan began to notice the cracks. Daniel's explanations grew thin, his late returns poorly disguised. When Ethan asked questions, Daniel deflected with practiced ease, yet the guilt tightened around him like a noose. He hated lying, but the thrill was too potent to release. One evening, as Daniel lay tangled with Leo on the leather barber's chair, his phone vibrated. The screen lit up, and Ethan's name glowed in bold letters. The device buzzed again and again, the sound slicing through the heavy silence of the shop. Daniel's heart slammed in his chest, torn between answering and silencing the truth. Leo glanced at the phone, then at Daniel, a smirk tugging him. The phone's vibrations faded into silence, but the echo lingered inside Daniel's chest long after. He stared at the screen, Ethan's name still glowing faintly before vanishing into darkness. A shiver coursed through him. For the first time, the thrill with Leo didn't feel liberating. It felt dangerous in a way that tightened around his ribs. The next morning, Ethan studied him over coffee with an intensity that made Daniel's stomach knot. Ethan rarely scrutinized anymore, yet now his eyes seemed sharper, searching. "You've been different lately," Ethan said softly, stirring his mug, though he didn't take a sip. "Distracted. Is there something you're not telling me?" Daniel forced a smile, but his voice wavered. "Just work stress. Nothing else." Ethan nodded, though suspicion lingered between them like an unspoken accusation. The air felt heavy, and Daniel realized the affair had begun bleeding into his home, staining the fragile peace he had left. A week later, Ethan suggested they go together to a new barber shop he'd heard about, the same one Daniel had been frequenting. Panic shot through Daniel like ice. He muttered excuses, too busy, not in the mood, already overdue on errands. Ethan narrowed his eyes, but said nothing more. The seed of doubt had been planted, and Daniel felt its roots twisting deeper each day. His moments with Leo became less intoxicating and more suffocating. Leo, once a spark of freedom, now carried demands. "Were you going to stop hiding?" Leo pressed one night, voice sharp. "Do you want me, or do you want to keep living in that safe, boring little box?" Daniel flinched. He wanted both the security of Ethan and the passion of Leo, but the two worlds could not coexist. He was balancing on a fault line, and every step risked collapse. The collapse came sooner than expected. One evening, while Daniel showered, Ethan reached for his phone on the nightstand, intending to silence the endless buzzing of notifications. His hand froze when the screen lit up with Leo's name, accompanied by a message that left no room for misinterpretation. By the time Daniel emerged, towel slung over his shoulders, Ethan was waiting in the bedroom, the phone in his hand. His face was pale, his jaw set hard, but his eyes burned with betrayal. "Who is Leo?" Ethan's voice was calm, almost too calm, which made it far more terrifying. Daniel's throat tightened. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The silence confirmed what Ethan already knew. The argument that followed was not a storm of shouting, but a quiet devastation. Ethan spoke in clipped sentences, his voice breaking at points, his questions slicing through Daniel's defenses. "Why? How long? Did I mean so little?" Daniel tried to explain, stumbling over apologies, insisting he still loved Ethan. But the words were hollow against the raw wound of betrayal. Finally, Ethan picked up his jacket and keys, his movements sharp with finality. "I can't look at you right now," he said, voice trembling. "I don't know if I ever can again." The door closed behind him with a sound that reverberated through Daniel's chest. Days blurred together after that. Leo called, left messages, even waited outside the barber shop hoping Daniel would appear. But Daniel couldn't face him anymore. What had once felt like salvation now felt like ruin. The passion had been real, but it had cost him the trust of the one man who had stood by him for years. Weeks later, Daniel returned to the barber shop, though he almost turned back at the door. The chair where Leo once stood waiting was empty now. Leo had moved on, the receptionist explained casually, as though the absence meant nothing. Daniel sat in silence, the cape draped around him, staring into the mirror. The haircut was ordinary, quick, devoid of sparks. Yet when Daniel looked at his reflection, he saw not just trimmed hair, but the hollowness of choices made in secrecy. The thrill had vanished, leaving only consequence. As he stepped out into the silence in Daniel's apartment grew heavier with each passing day. It wasn't just the absence of Ethan's voice or the missing echo of shared laughter, it was the silence of consequence, a silence that carried judgment. Every room reminded him of what had been fractured. The couch where they once spent lazy Sundays, the kitchen table where Ethan always read the paper, the bed that now felt cavernous and cold. Daniel moved through these spaces like a ghost, haunted by the memory of what he had destroyed. He replayed Ethan's expression that night, the disbelief, the pain, the quiet fury. That look etched itself into Daniel's mind far more deeply than any of Leo's passionate touches. Leo had sparked something alive in him, but Ethan's absence was the true measure of what mattered. Leo still called. Sometimes it was a gentle plea, other times an impatient demand. "Don't disappear on me," his messages read. "We had something real." But to Daniel, the words now felt hollow. What once seemed like liberation now seemed like a trap he had willingly walked into. He ignored the calls, though the guilt of silence pressed on him in a different way. He had betrayed Ethan, but in a twisted sense he had betrayed Leo as well. He was too cowardly to end things with grace, too broken to continue. At work, colleagues noticed his distracted air. He smiled less, drifted in and out of conversations, and often excused himself early. He told them nothing. The private turmoil remained as alone, contained behind a practiced facade. In truth, he was unraveling. One evening, weeks after Ethan had left, Daniel found himself outside their favorite cafe. The place where they had celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and countless ordinary mornings with laughter. He walked inside, the bell over the door chiming in a way that tugged at memory. Sitting at their old table, he ordered black coffee, though he barely drank it. He stared at the empty chair across from him, picturing Ethan there, newspaper in hand, glancing up with that subtle smile that once made Daniel feel chosen. The ache was unbearable. On impulse, Daniel pulled out his phone. He typed a message to Ethan, "I'm sorry. Not just for what I did, but for everything I let slip away between us. If you never come back, I'll understand. But I hope one day you'll know that I never stopped loving you." He stared at the words for a long time before pressing send. No reply came that night, nor the next, but sending the message shifted something within him. For the first time, Daniel allowed himself to stop running from Ethan, from Leo, from his own reflection. He faced the truth. He had sought passion in the arms of another because he feared the silence of his marriage, but in doing so, he had created a silence far louder. Weeks turned into months. Ethan did not return, though occasionally Daniel saw his social media updates, photos at work, a new haircut, a smile that still carried the same quiet strength. Daniel didn't reach out again. Some wounds were too deep for quick repair. Leo, too, faded into memory. The number still lived in Daniel's phone, but he never called it. The barbershop chair where it all began became a symbol he avoided, walking blocks out of his way to keep from passing those reflective windows. Yet, amid the loneliness, Daniel discovered a fragile resolve. He began journaling, attending therapy, piecing together the fragments of himself that had been lost long before Leo entered the picture. He realized that infidelity wasn't born from passion alone. It was born from neglect, from silence, from fear of facing the ordinary with honesty. One evening, Daniel stood before the mirror, running his hand through freshly cut hair. Done at a small, quiet barbershop this time, the reflection staring back was not triumphant nor healed, but it was honest. For the first time in years, Daniel didn't look away. He whispered into the stillness of the room,